During Thanksgiving dinner, my father asked me if I had enough money he was sending me for my education. I was shocked and asked, "What money?" Since I was working 3 jobs to support myself without receiving any money from my parents. And then my father turned pale. It turned out that my mother had been hiding those thousands of dollars and sending them to my sister for a luxurious life in London while I was working just to survive. My name's Jake. I'm 20 years old, and I'm a computer science student at Cambridge, Massachusetts. Yeah, not the fancy British one, but close enough to Boston that my parents could technically say their kid goes to school near Harvard if they wanted to flex a little. My parents live in Boston, and they're pretty well off. Dad works in finance. Mom used to be in marketing before she became a full-time homemaker. They agreed to pay for my tuition, which was awesome, but everything else was on me. And when I say everything else, I mean literally everything. Food, textbooks, gas money, laundry detergent, you name it. They figured it would teach me responsibility and the value of hard work. Classic American parenting, right? So there I was, juggling 3 different jobs just to survive college life. I was doing freelance web development whenever I could find clients, which sounds cool, but mostly meant staying up until 3 in the morning fixing some local bakery's broken contact form for $50. During the day, I was pulling shifts at this coffee shop near campus called Brewhaven. The pay was garbage, but the tips weren't terrible, and I got free coffee, which basically became my primary food group. But the real kicker was my evening job delivering pizzas. Now, pizza delivery might sound like easy money, but let me tell you, driving around Boston traffic with a car full of hot cheese bombs while college kids argue about whether you brought the right dipping sauce is its own special kind of nightmare. Plus, my beat-up Honda Civic was burning through gas money faster than I could earn it. My schedule looked like something out of a productivity horror movie. Classes from 8 to 3, coffee shop from 4 to 7, then pizza delivery until midnight on weekdays. Weekends were just more the same, except I'd squeeze in web development projects whenever I wasn't completely brain dead. I was pulling maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep on a good night. The weight started falling off me pretty quickly. I'm not talking about that healthy college freshman 15 reversal. I'm talking about legitimate, scary weight loss. I went from being a pretty average-sized guy at 170 pounds to looking like I belonged in a skeleton costume year-round. My diet consisted mainly of whatever expired sandwiches I could snag from the coffee shop, leftover pizza crust from deliveries, and those 99-cent ramen packets that taste like sadness mixed with salt. I was basically living on caffeine, carbs, and pure stubbornness. My friends started making jokes about how I could probably slip through prison bars, but honestly, it wasn't funny anymore. The exhaustion was hitting me like a freight train every single day. I'd catch myself falling asleep during lectures, which is pretty embarrassing when you're supposed to be learning about algorithms and your professor catches you drooling on your keyboard. There were mornings when I'd wake up and genuinely forget where I was or what day it was. But the real wake-up call came during my sophomore year. I was in my dorm room, trying to cram for a midterm in data structures, when everything just went black. One minute I'm staring at my textbook trying to understand binary trees, and the next minute I'm waking up on the floor with my roommate shaking me and asking if he should call 911. Apparently, I'd been out for almost 10 minutes. My roommate, Mike, was freaking out because he thought I was having some kind of medical emergency. I convinced him not to call an ambulance because, let's be real, college students can't afford ambulance rides. But that incident really scared me. I realized I was pushing my body weight past its limits. The thing that really got to me was how alone I felt in all of this. I'd see other students complaining about being broke while they grabbed lunch at the campus food court or talked about their weekend plans. Meanwhile, I'm calculating whether I can afford both gas money and groceries for the week. It's a weird kind of poverty where you're surrounded by people who have everything handed to them. I started questioning whether I was doing something wrong. Like, maybe other kids had figured out some secret to college life that I was missing. Maybe there were scholarships or programs I didn't know about. Or maybe I was just not cut out for this whole college thing. The worst part was feeling like I couldn't complain to anyone. My parents were already paying my tuition, which was more than a lot of kids got. My friends either had full rides or parents who covered everything. so they couldn't really relate. And my professors probably thought I was just another lazy college kid who couldn't manage his time properly. There were nights when I'd lie in bed, too tired to even take off my work clothes, wondering if this was what adult life was supposed to feel like. Was I supposed to be this exhausted all the time? Was this just what independence looked like? Because if it was, I was starting to think I might not be cut out for it. But here's where things get interesting. And trust me, you're not going to believe where the story goes. Because what I thought was just normal college struggles was actually the beginning of uncovering something that would completely turn my family upside down. Something that made me realize that all this time, while I was killing myself to make ends meet, there was a whole other story playing out behind the scenes that I had no idea about. And it all started with one phone call to my sister that changed everything. So after that whole fainting episode, I figured it was time to swallow my pride and ask for help. I mean, passing out from exhaustion isn't exactly the college experience they show in those motivational commercials, right? I waited until Sunday evening, when I knew my parents would be home from their usual weekend routine of golf and whatever rich people do on weekends. I called my mom first because, honestly, she'd always been the one handling the day-to-day stuff in our family. Dad was more the big-picture finance guy, but Mom dealt with everything else. Plus, I thought she might be more sympathetic to her baby boy slowly wasting away in college. The conversation started normal enough. She asked about my classes, whether I was eating enough vegetables, the usual mom stuff. But when I brought up my financial situation and mentioned that I'd actually fainted from exhaustion, her tone completely shifted. It wasn't concern or worry like you'd expect from a parent hearing their kid nearly collapsed. It was more like annoyance. She went into this whole speech about how character is built through struggle and how this was all part of becoming a responsible adult. Then she dropped the bomb that really caught me off guard. She told me they were going through a rough financial patch and didn't have any extra money to send me. She used phrases like tightening our belts and everyone needs to do their part. Now, here's where my story gets interesting, because that phone call left me more confused than a freshman trying to find their dorm after orientation week. My parents going through financial trouble? The same parents who just renovated their kitchen for the third time in 5 years? The same dad who drives a BMW that costs more than most people's yearly salary? But what really didn't add up was thinking about my sister, Aurora. She's 22, 2 years older than me, and she's been living it up in London for the past year. Not working, not studying, just existing as what my mom always called an aspiring artist. And from what I could see on her Instagram, she wasn't exactly living the struggling artist lifestyle. I'm talking designer coffee shops, fancy restaurants, weekend trips to Paris, clothing hauls that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her apartment looked like something out of Home Design magazine, and she was constantly posting about art galleries, theater shows, and cultural events that definitely weren't free. So there I am, eating ramen for the 5th night in a row, while my sister is posting pictures of herself at some fancy wine tasting in Tuscany. The math just wasn't adding up, you know? If my parents were really going through financial difficulties, how was Aurora maintaining this lifestyle? I tried to push these thoughts out of my head for a while. Maybe she had a job she didn't post about on social media. Maybe she was dating someone wealthy. Maybe I was just being jealous of my sister's seemingly perfect life, while I was over here looking like a scarecrow and surviving on caffeine fumes. But then Mike, my roommate, made this offhand comment that really got under my skin. We were in our dorm room, and I was telling him about the phone call with my mom, explaining why I looked like I belonged in a charity commercial for hungry college students. Mike listened to the whole story, and then just shook his head. He asked me point blank why my sister was living like a princess in Europe, while I was working myself to death just to afford basic necessities. He said it seemed weird that my parents would claim financial hardship while still supporting Aurora's lifestyle abroad. At first, I got defensive. I mean, Aurora was always a special one in our family. My parents called her their star child because she was artistic and creative, while I was just a practical one who was good with computers. Mom always said Aurora needed more support because she was pursuing her dreams, while I had a stable career path ahead of me. But Mike's question stuck with me like that song you can't get out of your head. Why was there money for Aurora's dream chasing in London, but no money to keep their son from fainting in his dorm room. It started eating at me, especially during those long pizza delivery shifts when I had nothing but time to think. I began paying closer attention to Aurora's social media posts, not in a creepy stalker way, but just noticing things I hadn't really focused on before. The frequency of her shopping trips, the quality of the restaurants she was eating at, the fact that she seemed to have unlimited free time to explore every museum and art gallery in London. Then there was this one post that really caught my attention. She'd posted a picture of herself at some high-end department store with the caption about treating herself after receiving her monthly allowance. Monthly allowance? I mean, I knew some parents gave their college-age kids spending money, but Aurora wasn't even in college. She was just living. I started doing some rough calculations based on what I could see in her posts. The apartment she was living in had to cost at least £2,000 a month, and that was being conservative. Add in all her dining, shopping, and entertainment expenses, and we were talking about a serious amount of money. Meanwhile, I'm having anxiety attacks about whether I can afford both textbooks and groceries in the same month. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore, and it was starting to mess with my head in ways I didn't expect. I found myself getting angry at random moments. I'd be in the middle of taking someone's pizza order, and I'd suddenly think about Aurora posting pictures of her brunch that probably cost more than I made in tips that entire day. Or I'd be debugging code for some client at 2 a.m. and wonder why I was killing myself for $50 while my sister was apparently getting handed money just for existing. The breaking point came about 2 weeks after that phone call with my mom. I was having one of those particularly rough days where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. My car broke down during a pizza delivery. I spilled coffee all over myself during my morning shift, and I got an AD on an important assignment because I'd literally fallen asleep while trying to finish it. I was sitting in my dorm room, staring at my bank account balance of $23.67, when Aurora posted another one of her London adventures. This time it was a shopping haul video where she was showing off all these expensive art supplies and talking about her new studio space. That's when I decided I needed to have a conversation with my sister. Not an accusatory confrontation, but just a casual chat to maybe understand how she was managing to live so comfortably while our parents were supposedly struggling financially. I figured maybe she'd gotten some kind of scholarship or grant for artists that I didn't know about. So I called her, and what happened next completely changed everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation and my place in it. I called Aurora on a Wednesday evening, right after I'd finished my shift at the coffee shop. I was exhausted, covering the aroma of espresso and frustration, but I needed answers. I tried to keep the conversation light at first, asking about her art projects and how she was enjoying London. Aurora was in one of her chatty moods, which actually worked out perfectly for what I was trying to figure out. She started going on about this amazing art class she just signed up for, some exclusive workshop that cost £1,500. Then she mentioned how she was thinking about getting a new laptop for her digital artwork, something top of the line that would cost around $3,000. Here I am, calculating whether I can afford both lunch and gas money for my car, and my sister is casually talking about dropping more money on a laptop than I make in 3 months. So I decided to test the waters a little bit. I asked her how she was managing to afford all these things, trying to sound genuinely curious rather than suspicious. I mentioned that I was struggling with money and wondered if she had any advice about budgeting or she'd found some secret to making money as a student abroad. And here's where things get absolutely wild. Aurora, completely oblivious to what she was about to reveal, started explaining her financial situation like it was the most normal thing in the world. She told me that Mom sends her $3,500 every single month, plus additional money whenever she has what Aurora called special needs. $3,500 every month, plus extras. I literally had to put the phone down and take a few deep breaths because I thought I was having another one of those fainting spells. Here I was, working 3 jobs and living on ramen noodles, while my parents were sending my sister more money in a month than I was making in 3 months of killing myself. But it gets worse. Aurora kept talking, completely unaware that she was dropping nuclear bombs on my understanding of our family dynamics. She mentioned that just last month, Mom had sent her an extra $2,000 because Aurora wanted to take a weekend trip to Italy with some friends she'd made in her art class. A weekend trip to Italy. $2,000. Just because she wanted to. Meanwhile, I'm over here having panic attacks about a $70 textbook that I need for class, and I'm considering whether I can find a used copy or just try to share with someone else, because I literally cannot afford it. I managed to keep my voice steady and asked Aurora if Mom and Dad had mentioned anything about money being tight lately. I was curious to see if she'd heard the same story about financial difficulties that had been fed to me. Aurora laughed and said that, yeah, Mom had mentioned something about needing to be more careful with spending, but she said it in this dismissive way, like it was just Mom being dramatic. Then she said something that made my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. She told me that Mom had actually increased her monthly allowance by $500 just 2 months ago because Aurora had mentioned that London was more expensive than she'd anticipated. Let me paint this picture for you. I'm working until midnight delivering pizzas to drunk college students who barely tip. I've lost 20 pounds because I can't afford proper meals, and I literally passed out from exhaustion in my dorm room. Meanwhile, my sister get a $500 raise on her allowance because London is pricey. I ended the call as normally as I could, but inside, I was absolutely losing it. I felt like I'd discovered some massive conspiracy that I'd been completely blind to my entire life. All those times growing up when Mom would talk about how Aurora was special and needed extra support, while I was expected to be independent and self-sufficient. I spent the next few days in this weird fog of anger and confusion. I kept replaying conversations from over the years, looking for signs that I'd missed. Like how Mom would always emphasize that I was a responsible one who could handle anything, while Aurora needed more guidance and support. Or how when we were younger, Aurora would get name-brand clothes for school while I got the generic store brands, and Mom would explain that Aurora was more sensitive about fitting in. I always thought I was just easier pleased, but now I was starting to wonder if there was a pattern I'd been too naive to see. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at the money situation, but at what felt like years of lies and manipulation. I'd been made to feel like asking for help was somehow weak or irresponsible, while Aurora was being handed everything on a silver platter. I decided I needed to talk to my dad. He'd always been more straightforward than my mom, and I figured he at least deserved to know what I'd discovered. Plus, I was hoping maybe he wasn't fully aware of the extent of Aurora's financial support. But before I could work up the courage to have that conversation, Thanksgiving break arrived. I'd been dreading going home because I knew I looked terrible. The weight loss was really obvious now, and I had these dark circles under my eyes that made me look like I belonged in a zombie movie. I drove home in my barely functional Honda, which was making this new grinding noise that I couldn't afford to fix, listening to Aurora's latest Instagram stories about her plans to spend Thanksgiving week in Scotland with friends. When I walked into our house, the first thing I noticed was how good everything looked. The new kitchen renovation was even fancier than it had appeared in Mom's Facebook posts. There were fresh flowers everywhere, expensive wine bottles on the counter, and the whole place just screamed money. Dad took one look at me, and his face went completely white. He asked if I was feeling okay. And when I told him I was fine, he said I looked like I had been sick for months. Mom chimed in from the kitchen, making some comment about how college students always look run down because they don't take care of themselves properly. We sat down for Thanksgiving dinner, and it was a surreal experience of eating incredible food while feeling like I was living in some alternate reality. The turkey alone probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in the past month, and here I was, finally eating a proper meal for the first time in weeks. Dad kept staring at me throughout dinner, clearly concerned. Finally, he asked directly what I'd been eating at school, so I told him the truth. Ramen noodles, expired sandwiches from work, leftover pizza crusts, whatever I could afford on my budget. That's when Dad asked a question that changed everything. He wanted to know why I wasn't using the money he'd been sending me for living expenses. The money he'd been sending me? I told him I hadn't received any money from him at all. That's when his face went from concern to absolutely furious, and he turned to look at my mom with an expression I'd never seen before. And that's when our entire family's house of cards came tumbling down in the most spectacular way imaginable. The silence at that dinner table was louder than a jet engine. Dad's face had gone from concern to absolutely livid in about 3 seconds flat. He was staring at my mom with this look that I'd never seen before, like he was seeing her for the first time and didn't like what he was looking at. Mom started doing this nervous laugh thing and tried to deflect by asking if anyone wanted more mashed potatoes. But Dad wasn't having it. He asked her directly what had happened to the money he'd been transferring to my account every month since I started college. That's when the whole story came spilling out, and trust me, it was even worse than I thought. Turns out, Dad had been sending me $750 every month for living expenses. Every single month for the past year and a half. He'd set up an automatic transfer and just assumed it was working because Mom handled most of the day-to-day banking stuff. But Mom had been intercepting that money and redirecting it to Aurora instead. She tried to justify it by saying that Aurora needed the support more because she was pursuing her artistic dreams, and that I was more capable of handling financial challenges on my own. Dad was absolutely losing his mind at this point. He pulled out his phone right there at the dinner table and started going through bank statements. The numbers he was reading out loud made my head spin. It wasn't just the monthly $750 that had been redirected. There were additional transfers throughout the year, sometimes $1,000 here, $1,500 there, all labeled as money for my college expenses, but actually going to fund Aurora's lifestyle. But then Dad found something that made even my mom go pale. Apparently, she'd also been dipping into what was supposed to be my inheritance from my grandfather. When my grandpa died 3 years ago, he left both Aurora and me $50,000 each to be held in trust until we graduated college. My mom had transferred $35,000 from my inheritance account into Aurora's personal account over the past year. $35,000. She justified it to herself as an advance on Aurora's inheritance, but she hadn't touched Aurora's original $50,000. So basically, Aurora had gotten $85,000 while I had $15,000 left. I honestly thought Dad was going to have a heart attack. His face was purple, and he was making these choking sounds like he couldn't get enough air. I'd never seen him that angry in my entire life, and growing up, Dad was usually the calm, measured one in our family. Mom tried to defend herself by saying that Aurora needed the money more, that she was investing in her future as an artist, that I was studying computer science, so I'd be fine financially after graduation. She kept using phrases like different types of support and playing to each child's strengths. But Dad wasn't buying any of it. He told her that what she'd done was theft, plain and simple. She'd stolen from her own son and lied to both him and her husband for over a year. He said some things that I probably shouldn't repeat, but let's just say he made it very clear how he felt about the situation. The immediate aftermath was like watching a controlled explosion. Dad got on his laptop, right there at the dinner table, and transferred $7,500 into my account to cover the missed monthly payments. He also started the process of transferring the remaining $15,000 from my inheritance account into a new account that only I could access. But the real shock came when he called Aurora on speakerphone. She was at some fancy restaurant in Edinburgh with her friends, and you could hear the confusion in her voice when Dad started explaining what had been discovered. Aurora genuinely had no idea that the money was supposed to be going to me instead of her. She thought Mom and Dad had just decided to support her artistic pursuits, and that I was managing fine on my own. When she found out that I'd been working 3 jobs and had literally passed out from exhaustion, she started crying right there on the phone. She felt terrible, but she also revealed just how much money had been flowing her way. In addition to the regular monthly payments and the inheritance money, Mom had sent her over $10,000 in extras throughout the year: weekend trips, art supplies, clothing, furniture for her apartment, even money to buy gifts with friends she'd made in London. Dad made some executive decisions that night that basically restructured our entire family dynamic. He took complete control of all the family finances, removing Mom's access to most of the accounts. He set up a proper monthly allowance for me that would cover not just living expenses, but also give me enough money to quit at least one of my jobs and focus more on my studies. He also told Aurora that the gravy train was over. She had 1 month to find a job or come back to the States, and her monthly allowance was being cut to $1,000, which was still more generous than what most college students get, but a far cry from the $3,500 she'd been receiving. The next few months were honestly pretty messy. Mom basically had a complete breakdown when she realized that Dad was serious about changing how our family operated. She'd gotten so comfortable with the dynamic where Aurora was the special princess, and I was the responsible one who didn't need help, that she couldn't understand why anyone was upset about it. She tried to paint Dad and me as the bad guys, claiming that we were being cruel to Aurora and that we didn't understand how hard it was to be an artist in an expensive city. She even tried to get other family members involved, calling my aunts and uncles to complain about how Dad was being controlling with money. But here's the thing about the truth. Once it's out there, it's pretty hard to argue with. When Mom tried to explain to my dad's sister why she thought it was reasonable to redirect my living expenses to Aurora while I was literally starving, even she couldn't make it sound justified. Aurora, to her credit, handled the situation better than anyone expected. She was devastated when she realized what had been happening, and she immediately started looking for work in London. She ended up getting a job at an art gallery and also started doing freelance graphic design work. She even offered to pay back some of the money she received, which honestly made me respect her a lot more. I told her not to worry about it, because it wasn't her fault that Mom had been lying to all of us, but the offer meant a lot. The most unexpected outcome was how this whole situation actually brought Aurora and me closer together. We'd always had this weird dynamic where she was the artistic favorite, and I was a practical afterthought. But once we both understood what had really been happening, we were able to have honest conversations for the first time in years. Mom eventually started going to therapy, partly because Dad insisted on it, and partly because she was genuinely confused about why everyone was so upset with her. It took months of sessions before she was able to acknowledge that what she'd done was wrong, and not just different parenting styles or supporting each kid's unique needs. The family therapy sessions were brutal but necessary. Hearing Mom try to explain her reasoning in front of a professional therapist made it clear just how twisted her thinking had become over the years. Dad filed for divorce about 6 months after Thanksgiving. He said that the financial deception was bad enough, but the fact that Mom had watched me struggling and even getting sick without feeling any guilt was something he couldn't get past. The divorce was ugly and expensive, but it was probably inevitable after everything that had come to light. But despite all the family drama, my life started turning around pretty quickly once I had proper financial support and could focus on my studies instead of working myself to death. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm sitting here as one of the top students in my computer science program. Turns out, when you're not working 3 jobs and surviving on ramen noodles, you can actually focus on learning algorithms and data structures. Who would have thought, right? The transformation wasn't just academic either. I gained back the weight I'd lost, started sleeping normal hours again, and basically remembered what it felt like to be a human being instead of a zombie stumbling between jobs. My GPA went from a barely passing 2.3 to a solid 3.7, and I even landed an internship at a major tech company for the summer. Dad's doing well too, which honestly makes me happier than I expected. After the divorce was finalized, he started dating this woman named Sarah who works as a nurse practitioner. She's nothing like Mom. She's down to earth, funny, and doesn't play favorites or manipulate people to get what she wants. Dad seems genuinely happy for the first time in years, and I'm glad he found someone who appreciates him. The divorce was expensive and emotionally draining, but Dad says it was worth it to get out of what he now calls a toxic situation that had been building for years. He admitted that he'd been checking out of family finances because he trusted Mom to handle things fairly, but he learned the hard way that trust without verification can lead to some seriously messed up situations. Aurora surprised everyone by actually thriving once she was forced to become financially independent. She kept her job at the art gallery in London and built up a pretty successful freelance design business on the side. She ended up launching her own clothing line that focuses on sustainable fashion, and it's actually doing really well. She moved back to the States last year and now lives in Portland, which is perfect for her whole artistic vibe. We talk regularly now, and our relationship is better than it's ever been. There's no more weird competition or favoritism dynamic because we both understand what was really going on during those years. She's even dating this guy Marcus, who's a carpenter and makes furniture from reclaimed wood. He's nothing like the pretentious art scene guys she used to hang around with in London. Marcus is genuine, hardworking, and doesn't care that Aurora used to be financially spoiled. They're talking about getting engaged, and I actually really like him. The funny thing is, having a budget and work for her money made Aurora more creative, not less. When she had unlimited funds, she was just buying expensive art supplies and taking classes, but not really producing anything meaningful. Once she had to be strategic about her spending, she got more focused and started creating work that actually sells. As for Mom, that's been the most complicated part of this whole story. The therapy helped her understand what she'd done wrong, and she did eventually apologize to me. Not one of those non-apology apologies where someone says they're sorry you feel that way, but an actual acknowledgement that she'd been unfair and had caused real damage. She's working now for the first time in over 15 years, which was a massive adjustment. She got a job at a marketing firm, and while it's not the high-level position she used to have before she became a full-time mom, it's giving her some independence and purpose beyond managing other people's lives. The relationship between Mom and me is still pretty strained, if I'm being honest. I don't hate her or anything, but it's hard to forget that she watched me literally collapse from exhaustion, and her reaction was to lecture me about character building rather than help. Trust doesn't come back easily after something like that. We have dinner together maybe once a month, usually with Dad and Sarah there too, which keeps things civil. Mom's trying to rebuild relationships with both Aurora and me, but it's going to take time. Some wounds heal faster than others, and feeling like your own mother considers you expendable is the kind of wound that takes years to fully process. The strangest part of this whole experience was realizing how much my understanding of myself had been shaped by the family dynamic I grew up in. I'd always thought of myself as a responsible, independent kid who didn't need help. But I started to wonder how much of that was my actual personality versus just adapting to being neglected. Turns out, I actually do like being independent and self-sufficient, but there's a difference between choosing independence and having it forced on you because you're not considered worth supporting. Once I had the choice to focus on my studies instead of working 3 jobs, I realized I could be both responsible and still accept help when it was offered. I'm graduating next month with job offers from 3 different tech companies, including one that would put me in their management training program right out of college. The salary they're offering is more money than I used to make in 6 months of working multiple jobs, and it feels surreal to think about having that kind of financial security. Dad jokes that I'm probably better equipped to handle success than most kids my age because I've already learned what it's like to struggle. He might be right about that. When you live on ramen noodles and wondered if you could afford both gas and groceries in the same week, a steady paycheck with health benefits looks pretty amazing. Aurora and I are planning to go on vacation together this summer. Just the 2 of us. It'll be the first time we've hung out without all the family drama and financial weirdness hanging over us. We're thinking about going to Japan because she wants to see the art museums in Tokyo, and I'm curious about their technology scene. It's funny how a relationship can completely change once you remove the toxic elements that were poisoning it. Aurora and I aren't competing for resources or attention anymore, so we could just be siblings who genuinely enjoy each other's company. Thanks for sticking with me through this crazy story. I know it was a long one, but there was just so much that happened over those few years. I'm curious what you all think about the whole situation. Was my mom's behavior as messed up as I thought it was? Or do you think there's something I'm missing? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed hearing about this family drama, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more real-life stories. Your support really means a lot and helps me keep sharing these experiences with you all. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.